I'm Emma and I play trumpet.
I'm Catherine and I play horn.
And I'm Michael and I play trumpet too.
And we're here to answer all the questions that you didn't get to ask while we were in Labrador last week.
Hi everyone, my name is Michaela, in case you forgot, and I am the tuba player in the Apollo 5 Brass Quintet. I'm coming to you from a place called Borden, Ontario, where I'm currently teaching at a summer music school.
Hi guys, my name's Aaron, and I played trombone in the brass quintet that you guys saw. I'm talking to you today from my home in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and I'm going to answer your questions.
All of us have participated in music festivals. I actually participated in the Labrador West Music Festival, as well as some that were out here in St. John's. We've all been there for choir, band, jazz band, and as soloists.
Do I teach private lessons? Yes. Right now I am actually teaching at a music school that only exists in the summer, but during the school year I teach all kinds of private lessons, mostly to tuba players, but I also teach a little bit of trombone and euphonium as well.
Yes, I do, actually. I teach trombone.
When I was in high school, I used to teach beginner piano lessons and theory lessons.
I actually currently teach trumpet lessons at my house.
And I used to teach trumpet lessons.
I never wanted to quit tuba because it was too hard. The only times I ever wanted to quit were when I was getting bored. So in those situations, I find it's really good to go and seek out new music or play with new people, and it sort of reminds me of why I love playing the tuba so much. And I've never ended up quitting.
Yes, I've wanted to quit a few times over the years because playing high notes on trumpet is pretty tough sometimes, and I get frustrated, but I decided that I was tough too. So if you're tough, you can play trumpet.
So the main parts of brass instruments are pretty standard between all of them. You have your mouthpiece. It gets smaller the higher you go, so the trumpet mouthpiece is really small. Then you have your actual instrument. The main part of the actual instrument there's always a bell. That's the part that flares out at the end. Usually you have valves, except for the trombone. All the other instruments have valves. Sometimes they look like this. Sometimes they look like on the French horn. Catherine has what are called rotary valves. They look like little paddles, but they work pretty much the same way. And then they have what are called tuning slides. So these are slides that move in and out to help make the tube longer or shorter. And they actually come all the way out like this. And so the tuba has a lot of these, but some instruments have more than others. Ooh, there we go. And those are the main parts of brass instruments.
Woohoo! Yes, some of you noticed that my trombone looks a little different from the ones that you guys are more familiar with. It has more tubing. That's because my trombone has an F trigger. And I'll show you what that looks like. Oh, yes. So the F trigger is this whole contraption right here. You can see that the extra tubing sort of goes up like this, and down around this big loop, back down, and then it feeds into the main piping of the instrument. So, when I push this little trigger down, that engages all this extra tubing. Thus, it makes my trombone sound lower than the regular trombones when I put the trigger down. So that means I can do cool stuff like this. Normally on the trombone, you have to go way out here to play this note. But with the F trigger, I just put it down and I can play that same note all the way up here. So essentially, that just makes my trombone a little more versatile than all the other trombones.
I started playing trumpet because my best friend played trumpet. I thought she was cool.
I started playing trumpet because my band teacher told me I had to.
And I started playing horn because my band teacher told me that it was the hardest, and I was a really stubborn little girl, and I decided I wanted to play the hardest instrument.
I never actually chose to play the tuba. When I was in grade 8, that was the year that my school started band, and we got to put in our top 3 choices, and I think mine were trombone, flute, and percussion, something like that. But my teacher told me that I had to play the tuba, and I was so upset. I cried for like 3 days, and then I started actually kind of liking it, and so I stuck with it.
In Fredericton, New Brunswick, where I grew up, we have the option to start playing in band in grade 6. So, on my first day of grade 6, I went in and I said, I want to be in band. But I wanted to play the flute, not the trombone. So, when I went in, we all got to try out the instruments to see which ones we were best at. And I tried to play the flute, I really did, but I was awful at it, and I was awful at the clarinet, and I was awful at the saxophone, and I couldn't play percussion because my rhythm was really bad. So the only instruments I was good at were the brass instruments, the trumpet, the trombone, the tuba, and the French horn. And so my band director saw this, and my band director said, Aaron, we need trombone players in the band. Will you play trombone for us? And I thought about it long and hard, and I said, yes. And the rest, as they say, is history.
There are lots of different types of metals that instruments can be made out of. And as you saw, some of our instruments were silver and some of them were gold. And you can even get instruments that are really pink, like rose gold. And the biggest difference is that the softer the metal, like gold, the warmer the sound is going to be that you make. And the harder the metal is, like silver, the brighter it's going to be. And 2 of the trumpets had really bright sounds because their instruments were made of silver.
Yes, I absolutely love to perform. It's one of my favorite things to do. When I was younger, I used to get nervous a lot more often than I do now. But because I've performed so much, I rarely get nervous now.
Besides the trumpet, I have played piano my whole life, and I've also sang in some choirs.
And I play piano as well, and I can also kind of play euphonium if I try.
I can play a very little bit of trumpet, but I've been playing piano since I was 4 years old, and I also sing in choir.
I can play most of the brass instruments, but not to the same level that I can play tuba. That's about it.
So it took me about 6 weeks of really hard work trying to arrange Let It Go for the brass quintet. And since I'm really busy right now, I unfortunately can't arrange it for you guys. So, no, do you want to build a snowman? Okay, bye.
Brass instruments are so twisty because how else would we ever get them on the bus to go to school? If you look at all of these different tubes all over my French horn, and we pulled them apart and stretched them out, they would be more than 20 feet long.
No
and
way.
I need all of those in
Oh
order
my
to play.
A trumpet for a beginner cost about $400 or $500.
And a French horn for a beginner, because it has all sorts of extra tubing and it's a lot longer than the trumpet, costs about $2,000, but you can rent them instead of buy them, and you can buy them secondhand.
You can buy your own student model trombone for anywhere between $300 and $1,300.
A student model tuba, brand new, costs usually between $3,000 and $6,000. They're pretty expensive, but you can get used student model tubas for much cheaper, usually around $1,000 to $2,000. That's still pretty expensive though, so a lot of places rent them out for a monthly rental fee.
When you're playing horn with your hand in the bell, you do feel the vibrations of the instrument, but I've been doing it for so long that I don't even notice.
Tubas weigh usually between 20 and 30 pounds. It really depends though. You can get tubas that are much lighter and tubas that are quite a bit heavier, but the one that I play is probably about 25 pounds.
Whoever starts a piece or has the melody at the very beginning cues the rest of the ensemble by taking a big breath and by moving our instruments like this. Ready, guys? And we can even do it with our eyes closed when we get really good at it. Let's try.
My band teacher first taught me how to play the horn in grade 6, and I didn't start taking private lessons on horn until I was 17 in university.
My band teacher started me on the trumpet in grade 4, and I started taking private lessons right away.
I started playing piano with my mom when I was 4 years old, and then in grade 6 I picked up the trumpet and played with the school band until grade 12 when I started taking lessons.
I started playing the trombone when I was in grade 6 band, and I had never had a private lesson before. It wasn't until grade 8 that I started taking private lessons.
It's important to remember that every single musical instrument is hard for its own reasons. The trumpet is really high and it gets really, really tiring on your lips. And the tuba is so big that you have to take huge breaths of air. And the trombone is really hard because it has a slide and it's hard to know where all the notes are. But people say that the horn is the hardest one to get started on because there are so many notes to play. There are 4 octaves of notes to play, and it's really hard to control them using your lips.
So one instrument that's not usually used in a brass quintet is called the euphonium, and it kind of looks like a mini tuba. I have one here. Let's see. See? They're very similar. The only difference is that this one is a lot smaller, and I'll play a little bit for you. It is called a euphonium because the sound it makes is very, very smooth and beautiful, and the Latin word for a smooth and beautiful sound is related to euphonium. So let me give this a try here.
There are so many different kinds of trumpets that come in lots of different keys and lots of different sizes, like B-flat trumpets, C trumpets, D trumpets, E-flat trumpets, and A trumpets. But we also have trumpets that are this tiny, called piccolo trumpets, and we also have trumpets that are this big, called flugelhorns, and we also like to play cornets. We all play in lots of different ensembles.
I like to play in jazz band, and I'm also a member of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment Band, so a military marching band.
And I like to play in the orchestra, and there's also a very special kind of band called a brass ensemble, and it's only made up of brass instruments.
We did a tuba and euphonium quartet one year. That was really, really fun. And all different kinds of people in all different kinds of groups because it's really, really fun.
Yeah, I play in a lot of different ensembles. I play in bands like your school band, I play in orchestras, I play in jazz bands, I play in brass ensembles, I play in brass quintets, and I play in trombone quartets. So yeah, I play in a lot of different ensembles.
So if you play one brass instrument, the difference between them is pretty small in the grand scheme of things. So if you remember how Emma showed us that you could play the garden hose, playing a brass instrument is very, very much like that. But the garden hose just gets longer the bigger the instrument is. So a trumpet is like the same length garden hose that Emma played in the presentation for you, but a tuba would be a really, really, really long garden hose. But the basic idea is still the same. We still buzz our lips. And then you put that through a long hose, and it makes a beautiful sound.
So there's two trumpets in the brass quintet because over the years, composers have tried a whole bunch of different groups and pairings, and eventually someone just decided that two trumpets and one of every other instrument was the best way to go for balance and blend and to make a nice, beautiful sound.
My favorite instrument growing up is a really hard question. I think it was probably trombone, because when I wanted to join band, I really, really wanted to play trombone. And part of that is because whenever we drove somewhere, my parents would play jazz in the car, and I'd play air trombone along with the music in the car, and it was really, really fun.
Well, when I was really young, my favorite instrument was the flute, strangely enough. And when I went into grade 6 band, I wanted to play the flute, but I guess you all know how that ended up now.
When I was your age, my favorite instrument was cello.
My favorite instrument was piano because that's the instrument I played when I was 8.
And I always wanted to play the trombone.
The first piece that we played for you guys was called Scherzo by John Cheetham.
The first thing that we had to do when we decided that we wanted to come on tour was ask all of your music teachers, like Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Noftel in JRS and Mrs. Parsons Clemens in Menahek, and see if they wanted us to come. And they really did, so we spent 4 months raising money. And we asked all sorts of sponsors like our school and H.J. O'Connell, which some of your parents work at, and we asked IOC for money, and we asked people for donations, and in the end we managed to come and didn't have to pay any money.
So that's all from us. We had a wicked time in Labrador and we really loved meeting you guys and playing for you. We hope you learned a whole lot, and if you have any more questions you can ask your teacher and they'll forward them to us. So that's all. See you later. Bye!
Bye!